bless America.
Pope Francis makes history addressing a joint session of Congress, urging lawmakers to support his political and pastoral agenda and to come together. Pope Francis visiting the current Fromhold Correctional Facility in Philadelphia, speaking to inmates as he wraps up his trip to Philly, spreading a message of forgiveness. The Pope began his 10-day trip in Cuba, conducting services in 3 cities and meeting with Raul and Fidel Castro, but not with human rights activists. Why not?
Tell them it's time to go.
House Speaker John Boehner calls it quits. Will the Tea Party wing of the GOP now take over the House of Representatives? And what does it mean for Florida politics? We will take it to the roundtable. Good morning. Glad you could be with us. Glenna is in Philadelphia. You will hear from her in just a moment. But first, the big story of the week, Pope Francis in the U.S. A triumphant tour. He has captured America's heart with his call for unity, mercy, and love. At every turn, the Pope showed his human side, kissing babies, hugging children, blessing the faithful, and asking non-believers to send him well wishes. In his homilies, he preached the message of mercy, compassion, and unity. He even brought a cantankerous Congress together for a peaceful hour and gave both Republicans and Democrats there something to embrace. My colleague Glenna Milberg covered the visit to Washington. She has moved on to Philadelphia. There she is now this morning. Glenna, good morning. How are you? And what is the Pope doing today?
Hi, Michael. Hello, everyone. It is a beautiful fall morning here in Philadelphia. There is still so much of Pope Francis's agenda left on this very last day of his U.S. tour. There is no doubt, as I'm sure so many have seen, that he has had a profound effect on so many here and across the country and across the world, many who've traveled here for his appearance. Within the last hour, he wrapped up his visit to that state correctional facility that you mentioned. And there, as Pope Francis has done throughout this trip, he has focused on the most vulnerable among us. I think the quote of this morning there from what is a very quotable Pope has been something like this. The Pope said, "Confinement is not the same as exclusion." And even in past speeches this week, we've heard the Pope has focused on the individual life, the sanctity of life. And in this context at the prison, that meant that rehabilitation was his message. Rehabilitation is a critical component of a consequence, and that each prisoner can be elevated and contribute to society.
All of us have something we need to be cleansed of or purified from. All of us. May the knowledge of that fact inspire us to live in solidarity, to support one another, and seek the best for others.
An amazing thing to watch. Pope Francis shook hands of every single inmate in that room, one by one. A couple of them got up. He actually hugged them. There was, to watch this intense personal connection that he has with everyone in front of him, even if it's just for a moment. It is very focused, very intense. Earlier, the Pope's first stop was a meeting with bishops at the historic seminary, where he is staying in the north end of the city. There he addressed head-on, really, one of the most controversial issues of the church right now, the sex abuse of minors, decades worth. He met with some of the victims of that crime, and some of whom have been publicly charging that the church has just not done enough to punish the church leaders responsible.
Dios llora.
God weeps.
Los crímenes y pecados de los abusos sexuales a
For
menores
the sexual
no
abuse
pueden ser
of children,
mantenidos en secreto por
these
más tiempo.
cannot be maintained in secret.
Me comprometo a
And
la
I
celosa
commit
vigilancia de la Iglesia
to a careful
para proteger a los
oversight
menores
to ensure
y
that
prometo
youth are
que todos
protected.
los responsables
I can't stress enough how this trip all week in every city has been so positive and so loving and so personal. And I think everybody who comes into contact with the Pope, even a glimpse from afar, has a very different and personal reaction and reflection of that. Over my shoulder, you see the Ben Franklin Bridge. That is a major thruway that is closed, as is so many roads in this city. But on that bridge today at 4 o'clock, the Pope holds what is his centerpiece of his trip, the reason for his trip, for the World Meeting of Families here. The Vatican has organized, and that's going to be a big public mass. Hundreds of thousands are expected to participate, and there are so many Catholics from around the world who have come here for this. But Michael, really what's been amazing here is to see the effect, this message of, the headline is the golden rule, whether he's talking about immigration, talking with inmates, talking at masses. The golden rule, treat others as you would treat yourself, has had this profound effect, not only on the faithful, but on people who may not be faithful at all, and all of different religions. It's really been a remarkable trip.
It has indeed, Glenna. Thank you for that report. He has had a huge impact, I think, on this country, a tonic kind of visit at a time when we needed exactly the message the Pope has brought. And we will see you later, Glenna. Thanks very much. The Pope, of course, played a key role in mediating talks between Washington and Havana. It certainly was by design that he first visited Cuba before he came to the U.S. And I think the big question for South Florida now, especially Cuban Americans, is, will the Pope's visit to Cuba improve the lot of the average Cuban? Will it make any difference in terms of human rights on the island? We want to put those questions to our guest. Dr. Andy Gomez is a retired professor at the University of Miami Institute for Cuban and Cuban American Studies. He was among the Miamians who made the pilgrimage this week to Cuba, where he was born. Carlos Rodriguez and his wife were also on that pilgrimage. He is the founder and leader of the Cuba Study Group, which advocates for improved relations between the two countries and between Cubans on the island and the diaspora. To both of you, Carlos, good morning. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Michael.
Now, I know you both have personal stories. I mean, your wife went to Holguin, where she was born for the first time, I guess, half a century. I want to hear about that and your impressions as well. But first, Andy, let me just ask you, I want to ask you both. The Pope made subtle references, I think, to the pro-democracy activists on the island, the plight of these people who are harassed, jailed, beaten, and have been now, and especially since last December when the new policy was announced. Are you disappointed that the Pope did not overtly say, you know, at some point, these people must be allowed to live their lives in freedom?
Not at all, Michael, because I think the Pope's messages, if you read it throughout the island, the speeches that he gave were quite clear of what he was trying to advocate to the Cuban people. Would I have liked for him to take time to meet with human rights or opposition leaders? Absolutely. But, you know, these are very sensitive negotiations that have gone on behind the scenes and in front. I was told by a high-ranking member of the Vatican that was traveling with the Pope that while he met with Raul Castro, one of the issues that he discussed was the point of human rights. So we have to wait and see where this will take us.
All right. Well, we don't want to jump to conclusions. Carlos, we don't know. Raul and the Pope met for an hour. It was private. Nobody has said what they talked about. Wouldn't you hope that, in fact, that he did talk about human rights and the ladies in white and Antunes and Dr. Bisset, all of these very brave people who are fighting for more space?
Well, I shared Andy's understanding. I understand that private meetings were held and things were said in private, as they should. This Pope, we need to understand this Pope. This Pope is a pastor, is a shepherd. A shepherd doesn't chastise his flock in public, and this is not his style. But in private, things may have happened, and my understanding is that they did happen. That brought this along. There have been numerous conversations in private between the Vatican and Cuban authorities, and I think that was the right context. You know, on the other hand, I think the Cuban opposition needs to ask a question: why are we not looked upon as such as relevant by other countries, by other nationalities in the geopolitical context. This needs, all of this process of opening Cuba up to the world and the world up to Cuba needs to put all of us, all of Cuban Americans and Cubans on the island and opposition figures to reimagine and reinvent their strategy and their position and plug themselves into the new reality. And it is different than the past.
And that has been, I think, at the core of the Cuba Study Group, which you lead.
That's exactly right.
Right. Andy, I just find it fascinating and frankly admirable that, you know, people, and I am of your generation, of course I wasn't born in Cuba,
right,
but people of your generation who lost so much when they were forced to leave their country have now begun to say, I can forgive, we must move forward, and the only solution to the problems of Cuba are between Cubans on the island and off the island. Am I misstating what's going on
I think you're right. I think a crucial mistake that we Cuban Americans made from the early stages, and it's been a part of our learning process, was to put the Cuban people along the same side as the Castros and their counterparts. I mean, their supporters.
Right, and you were gusanos, you were worms in the terminology.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you were denounced. The Cuban people were fed a diet of denunciation for decades by the Castro government about who you were.
Now, I also understand that there are many Cuban Americans in South Florida that lost loved ones that were killed by these two gentlemen, that they lost relatives trying to make it to the United States via the rafts, and I understand their pain. But at the same time, too, Michael, as a Catholic, as a practicing Catholic, what I also take from this Pope and my church is we have to forgive. We have to forgive and move forward. Michael, the social needs in Cuba, and as you know, I visited 3 years ago for Pope Benedict's visit.
Yes.
In 3 years, the level of poverty and the needs that exist today, and I was just in Havana, unlike Carlos and Olga that traveled to Holguin and other parts, is amazing. We have to build bridges with the Cuban people. Keep in mind that out of the 11 million people that live on that island today, 9 million were born after the start of the revolution. This is all they've seen. They have not traveled. They have not been able to get information from the outside. This is all they've seen. Should we blame them completely? Absolutely not. And what I found, they embraced us for being in Cuba. They want our help, and they need our help.
All right, so you got a warm welcome
Absolutely.
from Cubans on the island? When
Absolutely, and I saw it in Holguin with my wife. She is absolutely loved. People came out of everywhere to hug her, to love her, because she has so many friends. Even though she left many, many years ago, she still has a lot of friends and acquaintances, and she's just loved. And overall, the Cuban people are warm. They received us well. We're brothers and sisters. And as brothers and sisters, we need to follow the words of the Holy Father: reconciliation, reconciliation, reconciliation. Right. And reconciliation requires that we respect everybody's intrinsic dignity. It is fundamental. And dialogue. How many times did the Pope talk about dialogue?
Often.
We need to learn to talk. Right. And this is a message that was not only directed at us in Miami and at the Cuban people in general. This is a message that was also directed at the Cuban leadership. Dialogue, reconciliation, and respect for dignity.
Well, if Raul Castro will say it's time to dialogue, did his very presence at all the places where the Pope went, was that a message to the bureaucracy that runs the country, the military, to dialogue as well?
No, not at all. That point I don't completely agree, because I think you have to listen and read the message that he gave at the United Nations, which
yesterday.
Is, you know, and the Cuban people told me they don't expect immediate political changes. I don't expect it either. The message that Raul gave at the United Nations is, again, we want the United States to lift the embargo, and then he has the hypocrisy, I'm going to call it that, to blame the social and poverty that exists on the island and in other parts of the world on capitalism in the rest of the world.
Well, that is a rationale we have heard for decades, but we're going to hear it again. And yes, tomorrow when the Raul Castro speaks to the UN General Assembly. Hold your places, hold your thoughts. We'll be back with our guest here on This Week in South Florida live in just a minute. On the Sunday morning, live in our studio, Carlos Rodriguez of the Cuba Study Group, Professor Andy Gomez, retired from the University of Miami. And during the break, Carlos, you were saying that, yes, you saw a lot of poverty in Cuba, but you also saw more prosperity. Explain, where did you see this?
Well, Cuba's changing. What people need to realize is that Cuba is undergoing a process of change, maybe not as fast as we would like, but it is changing. And in this process, some people are getting richer, younger people are doing well, small businesses are doing better, but the elderly and others who are weaker in terms of society are doing worse and are getting poorer. So, and this process is going to get worse before it gets better. The church understands this, the Pope understands it, and the Cuban government does too.
Yeah. Andy, you explained to me in one of our several conversations that American business interests are putting huge pressure on the Obama administration, and the new regulations, which just went into effect Monday, are the result of a lot of those pressures. But as you explained to me, just because, let's say, Royal Caribbean or Norwegian, any of the cruise lines want to sail to Cuba, is no guarantee the Cuban government is going to say, come on down.
What I saw, and I agree with Carlos, that there is more small business enterprises, but at the same time, the infrastructure, the business infrastructure in Cuba today, controlled by the government, has not changed. In other words, to do business in Cuba, the risks are still greater than the opportunities. I'll give you an example, Michael. My wife also, Frances, traveled to Cuba for the first time in 54 years. Wow. And we were walking, Carlos, one day down Obispo, one of the main thoroughfares in Havana. Yeah. And Frances pointed to me, she says, you notice in the windows, it says, Hava Guavanex, a sticker in most of these very good-looking stores, restaurants, and some businesses. They're owned by the government. Right. So, in order for Cuba to really attract American foreign investment, which wants to go in, they're going to have to change the system. However, I'm not completely convinced that Cuba wants American foreign investment. They want foreign investments from other parts of the world. What they want mostly from the United States at this point, I think, is American tourist dollars. And we'll have to wait and see if the Cubans are willing to change that to really attract big businesses from the States.
Because as we know now, a branch of the military runs and operates most of the hotels and restaurants, although, as you say, there's been an explosion of casas particulares.
But with very few exceptions.
And with
all of these government-run enterprises are so poorly managed. Oh, yeah. We had to stop at a couple of government-run restaurants. The service is not even close to what it is at some of the private restaurants. Right. You visit some of the government-run hotels, and they are just very, very poor. Not all, but significant number of them. So even, you know, just because the military, by Cuban standards, is efficient or appears efficient, it is very easy to be efficient when you have no competition. So, you know, but in reality, they're not. And this is going to take a toll on the system. It's going to cost more money. The Cuban economy needs to open up, and sooner or later, they has to.
All right. Well, I think the most important thing here, and I don't want to sort of get into the weeds on some small things, but the message of Pope Francis to the Cuban people and the huge turnout, and we have to remember that, you know, Catholicism, all religion was banned for 1962, 1992, and the Catholic Church has been struggling to come back and make space, and they still can't run schools or hospitals, but nevertheless, this visit by the Pope, Andy, seems to have lifted up the spirits of the Cuban people.
There's no question about it in my eyes, Michael, and of course we experienced that. But I think these are also very different times. You have a Pope going to Cuba, as you said, that played a very significant role with the rest of the Vatican in bringing the United States and Cuba to establish diplomatic relationships. The work that the Church has done up to his visit, and I think will continue to do and increase at the parish level, it truly is amazing in some very difficult circumstances. So I do think, are Cubans going to become more Catholic? I don't think so. But are Cubans going to take the message from Pope Francis very positive, and they're going to continue, to build upon that? Absolutely.
Right. Well, I happen to think that people all across America may be reconsidering acts of kindness and trying to be a better person and follow the golden rule. And of whatever religion, I was with some Jewish friends last night, they said, I hear this message as well. Before we run out of time, I just want to point out that this morning in the Miami Herald, Mike Fernandez of Coral Gables, who is just an extremely successful businessman and philanthropist, has an op-ed piece in which he says that it is time to forgive and move forward. Mitch Medique, the former president of FIU, wrote a similar article. So I'm feeling the ground kind of shifting beneath our feet here.
We have been saying this for years, Michael. It's been shifting. It's not just started now. It's been shifting for the last 10 years. It is shifting big because the old conundrum that we must hurt the Cuban government and forget the people just doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
This is all about the people. And today, the Cuban American community understands the importance of the people, because ultimately, it is going to be the Cuban people who are going to be the actors of change in Cuba. And we need to open up to them and let that openness bring all the things that it always does. Change is a force in itself, and if we open the doors to change, no one can stand against them.
I think that's a good point on which to end this part of our conversation, but I pray you're right, Carlos, and Andy, you as well. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Always great to have you come in. Thank you. And my best to your wife, Olga, and a great visit she had to her hometown. All right, ahead in our roundtable, it is the surprising move from House Speaker John Boehner. He stepped down as the House Speaker, and we're going to take that up with our round table in just a minute. All right, time for our Powerhouse Roundtable, where we take a closer look at the week's big news stories. Some of the best and brightest in South Florida join us to do this. And, we have an outstanding group this morning. Bernadette Pardo is a veteran South Florida journalist in broadcast and print. You can hear her where? Let's see Bernadette, if we can. Here she is over here on my right. All right, she is on WQBA, or as I like to say, WQBA, La Cubanísima. I'm going to do a station break one day. On my immediate right is H.T. Smith, well-respected Miami lawyer and law professor at Florida International University. There is H.T. And here is Marely Cancio. Also, welcome back to you, Marely. She is a veteran roundtabler, Miami lawyer, Republican Party activist. Tim Paget is the Americas correspondent for WLRN Public Radio, also an op-ed contributor to the Miami Herald, former Miami bureau chief for Time Magazine. What a group. Thank you for coming in. If we can, let's begin with John Boehner and his resignation. And Marely, we knew that, this has got to be one of the toughest jobs in Washington, but his announcement kind of took all of us by surprise. Take you by surprise?
It took me completely by surprise, but I think looking in retrospect, seeing him crying with the Pope there and that beautiful message, it was the culmination of his political career. And I think it was a perfect timing for him to step back and let others take on the fight.
I thought it showed real grace, didn't it, Tim? I mean, you've had this zenith, this peak moment with somebody whom you revere, and you've been trying to get a pope. He had been trying to get a pope to speak to Congress for 20 or 25 years, and then he did. But I think the question I'd like to ask all of you is, did the Tea Party crazies, as they are called by some, drive him out of office?
I think so. I talked with Congressman Carlos Curbelo here from Miami early Friday morning, just as the announcement was coming out that Boehner was resigning, and he too pointed out that he thought the thing that made Boehner decide this was the time was this incredible emotion that he felt talking with the Pope. And it was almost as if, Boehner being a Catholic, I'm a Catholic. I know often we think about, what are our Via Dolorosas, the crosses that we carry. Boehner's been carrying this cross of trying to deal with, as you said, the extremists. And I think, that moment with the Pope, in a religious context made him decide it's time.
Yeah. And I think dealing with the extremists in his party, he had already decided the what, and that is, I need to step aside. I think the grace of the Pope, being inspired by his presence, elevated by his grace, caused him to answer the other question, when? And I really think he's probably the most content person in Congress today.
And he didn't cry the day he announced
he
it.
didn't.
I'm going to miss him because I think it's very liberating to see a grown man cry. I think it's good. And also, I think that the person who's going to miss him the most is Obama, President Obama.
Well, Obama made a couple of deals with John Boehner that may have not been possible with some other House Speaker, and now we're going to get a Californian, Kevin McCarthy. I confess I don't really know much about this guy, but I don't think in terms of policy doctrine he's going to be much different than John Boehner.
No, it's herding cats. You can't do it. You know, that's a job that no one can do.
You know, the Pope's, one of his main themes was the golden rule. You know, do unto others as you have them do unto you. Unfortunately, for politicians, the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rule. So although I think that he will have a tremendous lasting effect on Catholics and non-Catholics alike, I don't think he's going to have effect directly on Congress, but I think the people are going to make sure that Congress begins to do the business of the people as a result of what the Pope has done.
But I also think that the Pope spoke a lot about human life. And one of the fights that Congress is going to have is to Planned Parenthood and funding Planned Parenthood. And I think maybe that was the time that he said, you know, I know what I believe in, and perhaps he was not the one to...
But it was a little bit circuitous. The most intriguing thing I found out about the Pope, which I read a lot about, is that he's reading a book by a British guy, a strategist named Sir Basil Little Hart. Some of you may know him. I never did. The guy wrote a book called The Strategy of the Indirect Approach, which is perfect for the Pope because that's how he got, well, in the issue of life, he started out by saying, we must respect the sanctity of life at every level. And then every Republican in the House stood up who's against abortion and started clapping, and then he turned around and said, and that's why we should oppose the death penalty. No one had a chance to sit down.
Congressman Curbelo said the same thing. He says what struck him most was the fact that the Pope could come there and show this incredibly divided, polarized Congress, that you can take on these issues without demonizing the other side that you're talking to. And I think that also, I think, helped Boehner feel more comfortable about leaving because he could point to all these extremists and say, you see, I was right.
Yeah. You know, of all the places, now we have not yet seen the entire day in Philadelphia, and there will be this incredible mass later today, but I sat here on this news set and we covered all the visits. It was really a privilege to do so. And I don't know, I thought that watching the Pope's visit to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum it touched me so deeply because this is, HT, this is a wound that may never heal for Americans who lived through it. But I thought that his words, and then hearing from an imam and from a Sikh and a Buddhist and a Hindu, a Greek Orthodox priest, and the Jewish cantor who sang, it was just so touching.
It was so touching to millions, and again, not just Catholics. And I think that he let America and the world know that we can experience each other's pain and we can share in a brighter promise for the people. And he doesn't, go around saying Catholicism is the greatest religion in the world. He doesn't down Taoism, Jingoism, Buddhism, and all the other religions of the world. He's bringing them together, and that's exactly what he is. He's a healer, and that is very inspiring. As a matter of fact, I teach millennials, and they're saying it's cool to be Catholic. I hadn't heard that in 20 years.
I think in immigration, it was an important and powerful message. For me, one of the favorite moments was when he stopped the Pope-mobile to hug this little 5-year-old girl, Sofia Cruz, and really hugged her. And I think that spoke millions of volumes. And I wish he'd stopped the Pope-mobile in Cuba, too, but he didn't for the dissidents.
I love when he went out of his way to go kiss that boy in a wheelchair. His father was the leader of a band, and they had adopted 2 boys, the boy that is in a wheelchair and his brother. And he shows what a blessed family to have a kid of their own, adopt these two little boys, one that forever they're going to have to care for. And I have goosebumps because it was so emotional to see that.
This was the Trump antidote moment we needed.
Well,
wherever you are in the immigration, the level of vitriol that we were getting to, thanks to Senor Trump, on this issue was just getting out of hand, and that's why I think the Pope's timing, the timing of his visit was so important, and not just Trump. I mean, things that Ben Carson had been saying about Muslims. I mean, HT, you were just pointing out how important it was, the sort of inter-religious feeling that he established. It was just a very important moment
for us. This was a tonic for the soul of America, this visit. Well, we're going to talk about it more. Also, we'll get to Donald Trump, so stay with us. We'll be back with the roundtable in just a minute. Welcome back. We are rolling with the roundtable. Tim Paget of WLRN, Marilee Cancio, H.T. Smith, and Bernadette Pardo. H.T., I thought it was another good moment for the Pope when he was speaking to Congress, and he cited 4 Americans who he thought exemplified the spirit of this country, also the contributions that 2 of them, Catholic, but one of the people he lauded and singled out for praise was Martin Luther King.
Yeah, and you know, I screamed when I heard it because, you know, all 4 of them, though, are a lot like him. They are agitators for justice, agents of change. A lot of people forget that Martin Luther King changed America's apartheid system in 13 years from the age of 26 and assassinated at 39. You know, we all say life begins at 40. He never made it to 40, and he made significant change. That's what this Pope is doing. And by the way, the other 2 Catholics that he mentioned I hadn't heard of.
Dorothy Day, Thomas Merton.
You trust me, that's all I'm reading now.
Dorothy Day, not to be confused with Doris Day. Everyone looked her up in Google, and apparently she was, as you said, an activist during the Depression.
Fun for Catholics when he was giving the speech because he mentioned Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton, and there was this pause in the chamber as all of these congressmen and senators were trying to figure out who, and us Catholics were sitting there saying.
Well, as a young man, I had read The 7-Story Mountain, and not that I remembered a lot, but I remember because Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist priest from Kentucky, a mystic, a poet, but he was very anti-Vietnam War, and for my generation, he was a big figure.
Martin Luther King, one of his quotes is that at the end we're not going to remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
Yes.
And for me, when going back to the Cuba issue that they were speaking before, there was a beautiful letter today by Mike Fernandez in the Herald. We had great discussion earlier today, but there's 2 things that people have been quiet about. They're not talking about the people in jail. They're not talking about the dissidents that are being beaten up. And when Mike Fernandez said, well, there's not even anyone with a pot in Cuba in the, when they were raising the flags, well, I'll tell you that tomorrow in New York, when Raul goes speak at United Nations, there will be people from Miami that will be there against that, because how can you let someone like him speak in that forum when what he does is to kill people, put people in jail, and yes, now he has this holy face of I'm at all the masses, now I am this good Catholic, now I'm supporting the Pope, when really nothing has changed when it comes to doing business with Cuba. The government owns everything. But worse than that is the people that I support, the people that are there fighting for freedom and human rights. And we can't forget that.
Well, we have to keep the Pope, however, in proper context. He has spent his entire priesthood speaking and working with the least, the last, the lost, the looked over, and the left out. So his bona fides is there. And indirect action will give us direct results. And I think he's trying to help the people today while giving them hope for tomorrow. Because no matter what system you're under, you still need to eat, you still need a place to stay, you still need the kinds of things that he's trying to get the Catholic Church to provide more
The
of.
most tangible thing, I think, and overlooked in the rush to welcome him, what happened in Cuba between the guerrillas of the FARC in Colombia and the Colombian government. And that was the Pope who said, you guys, you have no time left. You got to go
So
through
they've
with
come
this.
close to an agreement, have they
They had come
not?
close for 3 years, and they just hammered it out in the last 2 days. And the important thing, and I wish it would apply to Cuba, they found a way, good, bad, or indifferent, to have some kind of acknowledgement of guilt, of responsibility for both sides. That people will go to prison, people will pay in some fashion for all the bloodshed over those 50 years. And that was impossible a month ago.
And they got there because Juan Manuel Santos, the president of Colombia, sort of took the church's advice and brought victims from both sides of this conflict of Colombia into these talks in Cuba and sat them down and talked to both sides and say, this is what you did to us, this is what you also did to us, but we forgive you because we want the country to move forward.
It's hard to understand here how deeply, I mean, because I know a lot of Colombian families. I've lived there. I don't know a single one that has not had someone killed or kidnapped. It's incredible.
Well, it's wonderful that they've done this, found a way to solve this. It's been half a century, has it not? I mean, it's been a long time. You know, before we run out of time, I want to go back to a point you made, Tim, I think you've all made, and that is Pope Francis arrived in this country at a time that was just, the mood was so depressed, and a lot of it, frankly, is because of comments that Donald Trump and some other presidential politicians have made, and that fog this week, it just kind of lifted, didn't it?
Yeah, very refreshing, absolutely. I think we're all more inspired and we're more hopeful, and again, it's bringing more people back to the church. There's going to be 1 million people in Philadelphia this afternoon for the live mass, and I think that's very exciting.
I think there may be some people who ordinarily would watch a football game who are going to turn over at least at halftime and say, let's see what.
I'll go backwards and forwards with the thing. But you know, in direction again, his 4 words, I am an immigrant. That indirection and transference of what an immigrant is to one of the greatest men who are on the planet today, I think says a lot.
And what he's always asked, pray for him. That's what he asked.
Wonderful. If not, give me good wishes.
We do. And we do. I want to thank you all. Wonderful discussion.
It's not over, is it?
I'm afraid it is, HT, but guess what? Next Sunday, come on back. All right. Cuban President Raul Castro is going to address the UN for the first time tomorrow. What he had to say ahead of tomorrow's speech in front of the General Assembly and President Obama. Tomorrow, Cuban President Raul Castro is going to address the UN for a second time. Yesterday, he stood before the General Assembly and discussed the improving relations between the U.S. and Cuba, but at the same time, he called for the embargo to be lifted. Local 10's Sanela Sabovic has that story.
Since Raul Castro arrived in New York City on Thursday, he's gathered with several leaders, and last night was no different. The Cuban leader met with former President Bill Clinton for the first time. Cuban state-run television showed video of the men shaking hands. And here's a look at that meeting right there. According to the report, Clinton asked Castro how he was doing, and Castro replied, "Better now that I finally met you." The men talked about a number of issues, including the Clinton Foundation. That high-profile get-together was one of many for Castro. It's been a busy weekend for Cuban President Raul Castro since he arrived in New York City, and he is making the theme of his trip clear: Cuban economic development. Late Saturday night, Castro met with New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio at Cuba's government office to the United Nations. The mayor's office said the men met for about an hour and touched upon a variety of issues, including health care and education. Just before that meeting, Castro spoke at the United Nations for the first time, where he hailed the renewed diplomatic ties between the U.S. and Cuba. The opening of embassies and the policy changes announced by President Obama with regards to our country constitute a major progress, which has elicited the broadest support of the international community, Castro said. However, Castro did slam a U.S. trade embargo, saying it's the top obstacle to Cuba's economic development.
Esta política
Such policy is rejected by 188 United Nations member states that demand its removal, Castro added. Castro is set to address the UN General Assembly on Monday, where he will speak in front of more than 140 world leaders, including President Obama. The two are expected to meet, although nothing official is planned. The gathering at the UN could end with a first for the U.S., and that's abstaining from a symbolic UN vote that calls for the decades-old embargo to end. And while in New York, Castro also met with Governor Andrew Cuomo on Friday, where the pair discussed the economy. You may remember Cuomo visited Havana back in April. Reporting in the newsroom, Sanella Sabovic, Local 10 News.
Sanella, thanks. All right, still to come, my personal perspective this week about some of the many highlights and a few lowlights of the Pope's trip. That's coming up. Here is a view from the Fort Lauderdale Tower Cam. A few clouds out there, but let's get the expert weather forecast from our meteorologist, Jennifer Correa. Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Michael. Yes, it looks beautiful when you look out east. And by the way, temperatures already hitting those upper 80s in Broward to Miami-Dade, still in the low 80s for the Keys. And the Keys are dealing with a lot more cloud cover and a few showers still. But this is what it feels like out there for us here in South Florida. It already feels like the upper 90s for the much of the area. And we still have those showers and storms pushing towards the north over the Keys. Key West, though, has dried out, but now Marathon is getting some of that rain. It'll stay very cloudy out there. For us, heading out to Sun Life Stadium at 4:25, kickoff temperature 88 degrees. It'll be very humid, but slight chance for a shower storm. We are tracking this area because this could enhance the moisture here in South Florida, so we're keeping it active for the next several days.
Jennifer, thank you. All right, before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about Pope Francis. Today he is, of course, completing his 6-day trip to the U.S., visiting inmates at a prison in Philadelphia, and then later this afternoon he will hold a huge outdoor mass, then leave for Rome. This has been an inspirational visit in America, the land of the free, home of the brave, as the Pope noted when he arrived. In the past, he had been critical of free market capitalism, our capitalistic system, but before Congress, he praised business as a noble profession as long as the profits are shared fairly. Let's face it, Pope Francis is a social liberal and a religious conservative. Nothing wrong with that. His success, however, I think, is mainly due to his personal style, modest, humble, warm, approachable, symbolized by choosing a small Fiat for this trip instead of a big limousine. That won him legions of admirers, and frankly, I'm one of them. His words and how he said them have made us all think about how we need to be kinder, more considerate, and to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. The Pope's visit has been a spiritual tonic that America needed very badly. But there was one keen disappointment for me during this trip, his failure in Cuba to speak out publicly and strongly about the plight of pro-democracy activists. Francis didn't meet with any activists there, didn't mention them overtly in any of his public sermons or speeches. I found that disappointing. These brave men and women are harassed, beaten, jailed by the Castro government just for gathering peacefully and asking for basic human rights. They needed the Pope's support, and he wasn't there for them. Who knows why he wasn't? Maybe Francis thought saying something would upset the delicate new balance between the Cuba and the U.S. Maybe he thought it would hurt the space the Catholic Church wants in Cuba. Yes, there may have been a downside to speaking out, but there's only one person who has the moral standing to chastise and correct the behavior of the Castro brothers. That is Pope Francis, and he didn't do it. A missed opportunity and a pity. That's my perspective for this week. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Hey, go Dolphins, get going. And remember, as always, stay informed, get involved. I'm Michael Putney. And we want to know what you think. Come on, reach out to us on email, Facebook, Twitter, any of those addresses. We will get back to you. Have a great Sunday.